Hello and welcome to the Friday, January 17th, 2020 edition of Tesla Daily, unofficial Tesla podcast. My name is Rob Maurer. Today we are talking about China registration information for Q4. We also have a petition into NHTSA to investigate Tesla. I'll explain what that means. We have a couple Elon Musk tweets, and then we'll also hear from Baillie Gifford's James Anderson on some insight into Tesla. Tesla stock on the day today did finish down 0.6% to $510.50. That compared to the NASDAQ up 0.3%. I'm not reading too much into the price action at the tail end of this week. This was a major options expiration week, and I think that probably had some influence on the trading over the last couple of days, as today was the expiration for what began as the January 2020 leaps, which were the first options available for 2020 a couple of years back. Those options can have weird impacts on trading, especially when it is such a significant amount of contracts. A couple other housekeeping things here. On Monday, the markets will be closed for Martin Luther King Jr. Day. And today, Tesla scheduled the Q4 earnings report for Wednesday, January 29th, after market close. So this was the date that I expected based on the calendar that we've seen over the last 7 quarters or so, meaning this is neither early nor late, so I wouldn't read into it as being particularly bullish or particularly bearish just from the date alone. All that being said, I do expect next week to be strong. I think the long weekend will give people a chance to think longer about Tesla, and my hunch is that options caused the stock to be a little bit weaker at the end of the week this week. So I did make some speculative trades at the end of the day today based on that hunch, but again, just a hunch. Getting into the news then, Bloomberg is reporting today per China Automotive Information Net, China registrations for Tesla in the month of December, and that number is 6,643. So that's actually the second best month of the year for Tesla, second only to March. If you remember back to when we discussed this data for November registrations were actually the highest second month in any quarter. Generally, these registrations build towards the end of the quarter in any given market, as Tesla's logistics tend to backload the end of the quarter with deliveries in any given market. But November registrations for Tesla were about 5,600 units, and the second best second month of any quarter was about 2,800 in September. So the question that I posed at that time was how strong December would be, because we had the looming increase in China auto tariffs for mid-December that then ended up being pushed out. So I was speculating that maybe Tesla had front-loaded for more deliveries in November to try to get in before that tariff, which I think seems logical, but here we're actually seeing that December was still quite strong as well. Nice to see that, but in any case, the registrations for the quarter in China were about 13,000 vehicles. It's about 17% higher than the previous high quarter, which was Q2, at about 11.1 thousand. And just for reference, Q1 was about 10.8, and Q3 was about 7.9. Nice to see Q4 be the strongest quarter despite the fact that made in China Model 3 deliveries were looming. While deliveries may vary a little bit, like we talked about with the China registration numbers earlier this week, the registrations for the year ended up being about 43,000 vehicles compared to about 16,000 in 2018. Not that it means too much to look at it from this way, but just as a fun fact, the same percentage growth for 2020 would mean about 115,000 registrations. Next up today is a story that is developing, and it does seem to be putting some pressure on the stock in the after-hour session. Of course, immediately following me talking about how I think next week is going to be strong, so maybe put a pin in that. But here's my understanding on the NHTSA situation as it sits right now. CNBC is reporting that a quote-unquote independent investor named Brian Sparks has filed a petition with NHTSA's Office of Defects Investigations, asking them to investigate a collection of 127 complaints about unintended acceleration in Tesla vehicles. NHTSA's Office of Defects Investigations summarizes this by saying, quote, "On December 19th, 2019, the Office of Defects Investigation received a defect petition by email requesting a defect investigation of alleged sudden unintended acceleration in model year 2012 through 2019 Tesla Model S, model year 2016 through 2019 Tesla Model X, and model year 2018 through 2019 Tesla Model 3 vehicles. In support of his request, the petitioner cited 127 consumer complaints to NHTSA involving 123 unique vehicles. The reports include 110 crashes and 52 injuries." End quote. So that is the petition, and this is where I get a little bit confused about where we are in terms of the status of any investigation. The ODI summary continues on to say, quote, "A copy of the petition will be added to the public file for this defect petition, and ODI will evaluate the petitioner's allegations to determine if the petition should be granted or denied. If the petition is granted, ODI will open a defect investigation. If the petition is denied, ODI will publish a notice in the Federal Register." End quote. At the top of this document, it says date investigation opened, and then it says January 13th, 2020. So that's where I get confused, because I don't know if that means that's when they're starting to look into the petition, or if they have already looked into the petition and the January 13th date is when they actually decided to open an investigation. I'm not familiar enough with their process, and I can't seem to find the answer anywhere, and the media reporting seems to be conflicting on this. So CNBC, an organization that doesn't tend to pull punches on Tesla, said, quote, "Once it evaluates the contents of the petition, NHTSA, which has the power to mandate vehicle recalls or recalls of components and other technology in vehicles, will decide if it should open a formal probe. If it decides not to offer a formal probe, it is expected to say why not with an entry on a federal registry." End quote. That statement leads me to believe that CNBC's interpretation of the current situation is that the status is NHTSA investigating the merit of the petition rather than investigating Tesla at this point. Regardless of any of this, and regardless of the after-hours market action, to me, this is pretty much a non-story. In the past, we've had numerous different reports on these unintended acceleration incidents, and Tesla checks the logs of the vehicle, and shocker, the accelerator was pressed, causing the car to, wait for it, accelerate. I think the more interesting part of this story is actually who filed it. So CNBC says, quote, "Sparks said he conducted primary research and submitted the petition, which CNBC obtained, because he was moved by the personal story of Jennifer Terry. Sparks is currently shorting Tesla stock, but has hedged his bets and been long shares of Tesla in the past." End quote. Well, how very generous of Sparks to take this issue on. In all seriousness, though, I know I joked about the after-hours trading earlier, but I would expect this to fade over the weekend. Friday afternoon is already the least impactful time for this to come out, let alone Friday afternoon on a long weekend. Next today, I just wanted to quickly highlight an Elon Musk tweet in reference to Sandy Munro of Munro and Associates. We've talked about him plenty of times in the past on the podcast. He's been both extremely positive and very critical of Tesla in the past, specifically on the critical side in terms of some of the structuring decisions on the Model 3 body. But most recently, he's been really talking up the Tesla Cybertruck and the cost savings that the stainless steel exoskeleton plus the lack of paint will allow Tesla to have. And I think importantly, he's also been very bullish on Gigafactory Shanghai and the incredible margins he thinks Tesla can achieve from the Made in China Model 3. So anyway, Elon Musk giving a big boost to Munro's credibility today by saying, quote, "Munro's analysis of Tesla engineering is accurate, both pro and con. I think he will appreciate some elements of the Model Y body design." End quote. From this, to me, it sounds like Tesla has improved on some of the criticisms, which were really some of the only criticisms that Munro had about the Model 3 with the design of the Model Y. That's a strong hint at lower cost or even more improved profitability for the Model Y, as most of Munro's criticisms were founded from a profitability perspective. Lastly today is some insight from James Anderson, who is the fund manager for Baillie Gifford. They are the largest institutional investor in Tesla with about a $7 billion position. James took part in Barron's annual investor roundtable and shared some thoughts on Tesla. And on the topic of Tesla's valuation, he said, quote, "When we talked to Elon Musk in 2013, he said there was a small but growing possibility that Tesla could become the largest company in the world. We try to see whether that small possibility is becoming greater or less of a possibility. They have met certain targets that are remarkable. First, they effectively got to equivalence. The Model 3 is no more expensive than an internal combustion engine car." End quote. Continuing on, he says, quote, "In terms of the efficiency of the powertrain, none of the conventional companies are now where Tesla was even 6 years ago. Their leadership is increasing rather than decreasing. If you put that together with an improving, though still not perfect culture, this company is functioning in a way much superior to what it was 2 or 3 years ago. It's easy to see 1 million cars a year. That is likely to generate $5 billion in free cash flow. I can construct a scenario where the stock can be worth $5,000, but you should just let the probabilities work through." End quote. I think these comments are especially refreshing after we went through the Adam Jonas note yesterday. Just some clear, level-headed analysis discussing different probabilities and facts that we can glean from the competitive environment. I don't think there's any coincidence there with them being the largest institutional investor. In this roundtable, Anderson was also asked how he feels about Elon Musk as CEO, and he said, quote, "What you want is his sense of inspiration. I think he may well step back, and that would be a good thing, not a bad thing." End quote. This one I don't agree with as much. I mean, Elon has said in the past that he doesn't necessarily want to be CEO, and if there were a better person for the job, that they could definitely have it. He seems to view his own strengths as product and engineering, but there's a reason he's still CEO. There isn't a better person to be CEO of Tesla right now, in my opinion. As we just talked about Elon's compensation plan, this is actually structured into his compensation plan, but the SEC thing with the whole 420 funding secured settlement kind of threw a little bit of a wrench into that. Because under the compensation plan, Musk doesn't actually need to be CEO. He needs to either be CEO or serve as both executive chairman, and chief product officer. And with the settlement agreement with the SEC, Musk had to step down as chairman for 3 years, so he can't actually get that position back until November of 2021. If any of the milestones were achieved during a period of time where Elon was not either the CEO or the combination of executive chairman and chief product officer, then those corresponding tranches would not actually vest. So we'll at least have Elon around for another couple of years as CEO, and after that, there's the possibility again of the structure changing to some degree. So that is it for today and for the week. I'll either be back on Monday or Tuesday, depending on what the news is. May take Monday to work on some other things with the markets being closed. But don't forget to subscribe, and I'll see you next week. Thank you.